That one Gibson directed film that never gets remembered.
Those were up, and they did.
We're smart, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review, and this movie review is going to be for a film from Mel Gibson, not one he stars in, it's one of the films he directed, one of the times where he's the director. And this was for the last film he directed for a while because this was released during one of his controversies, so he was kind of kicked out of Hollywood for quite a bit. He did still act after this movie, but he didn't direct another film until 10 years after this movie. For theatrically released anyways. I think he did a limited released one, but I think that was just producer, but this is for his directed ones. This was for one released in 2006, and it was for a certain group of people that aren't around anymore. The Mayans. Or the Aztecs. Yeah, this one was going to be for none other than 2006's APOCALYPTO. And the plot of this one, well, this is set during the decline of the Maya civilization, around the time before the Spanish tribes we all know entered. This peaceful tribe gets brutally attacked by warriors that are seeking slaves and human beings for sacrifice for their gods. One named Jaguar Paw hides his pregnant wife and son in a deep hole nearby their tribe and gets captured while fighting with his people. Then an eclipse spares his life in the sacrifice, and he has to fight to survive and save his beloved family. Yeah, it's the plot of the film. Well, and how was this made? Well, Jarrod Safina, the screenwriter co-producer of the film, had met Mel Gibson working as an assistant during the time he was making Passion of the Christ. Then Gibson and Safina found time to discuss their love for movies and what excited them about filmmaking. And Gibson said they wanted to kind of shake up the style of the action genre. And because he felt during the time it was getting dominated by CGI and not very great characters and some limited stories. And create something that would feel like a car chase that kept turning the screws. So the two found ancient Maya history, and they read both the creation and destructional myths, and especially with Paul Pavum. And of course, when that commentary of the film's first DVD release, Safino had stated that the story was modified from authentic tale that translated that Chicano was a professor of Mayan, and they used a Mayan language for the film. Into the Mayan language for the film. And also, it served as a dialogue. He also even served as a dialogue coach during the production of the movie. They researched the script, and Savina Gibson went to Guatemala, Costa Rica, and Yucatan Peninsula to scout film locations and visit the Mayan ruins. And then they strived for a degree of historical accuracy, so the filmmakers employed a consultant named Richard Hansen, a specialist in the Mayan history and professor of archaeology, for all that. As director of the Mirador Project, he worked to preserve this large swath of Guatemalan rainforest for the Maya ruins. And of course, of Hansen's involvements, what Gibson said was Richard's enthusiasm was infectious, and was able to reassure them and make them feel secure that they were writing some authenticity as well as imagination. So, anyway, after APOCALYPTO was filmed and completed, it would go on to be released by Buena Vista Pictures at the time, was the somewhat the adult version of Disney, I guess. And Mel Gibson's company, Icon Film Distribution, in the United Kingdom and Australia. It was Buena Vista in North America. And it got paused, and when it released in December 2006, I think December 8th, 2006, it got positive reviews from critics. There's people who praise Gibson's direction, similar cinematography, and the performances of the cast, but there were some historical inaccuracies, and the Mayan civilization portrayal was criticized. But the film was like, the film, for box office wise, I don't think it did that great at the box office. Like, this only made like $120 million worldwide on a $40 million budget. Maybe moderately, but I don't think it was really successful if you count all the advertising stuff. So I probably would not call it a success at the box office. But now as for my reaction, I'll get to the box office stuff later. As for my reaction, this is probably, I think this might have to be one of Gibson's more underrated films, of his directed ones, that is, because he did not star in this, he directed this. Like, honestly, like, I get this was released during Mel Gibson's controversial moment, one of his most controversial moments at the time, but I never understood how, instead of making this in 2004, I don't know why he could have made this in 2004 instead of making Passion of the Christ, which I don't get how that movie got so much praise and got a pass, or the success of the box office. I'm not a fan of, yes, guys, like, I'm not a fan of Passion of the Christ, guys. I think that film is very overrated. Like, the only reason Passion of the Christ got success was because it was literally just a guy getting tortured for 2 hours. There's no plot. Just a guy getting beaten, tortured, killed for like 2 hours. How is that pure cinema? That's not a film? I'm surprised that made money. I don't get how that movie made money. It really should not have. Yeah, and somehow it still has the highest grossing R-rated domestically thing. No, I'm sorry. Like, I think Apocalypto was the movie that should have got made in 2004, and that movie should have got Passion of the Christ's praise and box office instead. Because, yeah, well, Apocalypto has gore, like, really gory. This film is gory as shit. Holy fuck. That movie has more of a plot. Apocalypto actually has a protagonist, a story. So, it feels like a film. It's at least has a story. Unlike Passion, which is just torture for gore for 2 hours with no story whatsoever. So yeah, this should have had Passion of the Christ box office, and I feel like if this had been released in 2004, had been the movie Gibson did in 2004, it probably would get more attention. But the problem was, this released during Mel Gibson's most controversial moment that almost got kicked out of Hollywood. So that was a bit of a problem, and so people were boycotting Mel Gibson. People didn't want anything to do with him, so this movie did not get noticed in theaters. This movie did not perform well. I think it kind of bombed the box office, and yeah, it got reviews from audiences, but even after that, Mel Gibson pretty much was out of Hollywood for a while and pretty much never surfaced for years with directing any movies. He would not resurface again until Hacksaw Ridge. And, he did star in, and when he did star in movies, though, Gibson still did star in films, but the films he starred in after this were all shit. There was Edge of Darkness, The Expendables 3, which he was the best part of that shitty movie. And he also did one of the Daddy's Home films. He did a shitty Christmas sequel. He starred in that. And unfortunately, that had to happen after he directed Hacksaw Ridge, which saved his career. Like, Hacksaw Ridge he never directed another movie after this until Hacksaw Ridge. But onto Apocalypto. Apocalypto, it's a fairly straightforward adventure story, with a lot of brutal action, and it hints at subtle but intelligent critique of religious fanaticism, elitism, and classism, and displays its great respect for the living culture it loosely portrays. If you think about this, guys, this is almost the same exact concept and idea as 10,000 BC, except unlike 10,000 BC, which sucked ass, and is probably Roland Emmerich's worst movie tied with Independence Day 2, this movie was actually done better, and this film was actually done better. It's like the actually good version of 10,000 BC, except about the Mayans and not the cavemen. If I wish Mel Gibson didn't get kicked out of Hollywood, and if the controversial moment had not happened, I wish Mel Gibson could have directed 10,000 BC and actually tried to make it good. This is the movie you get when you actually have a good version of that movie. A better written version with good writers. and actual research, because Gibson actually did mind research when he did this film, when he was directing this. I'll give credit. Gibson actually does research when he directs movies. Actually puts the thought in. And like, I think 10,000 BC was from a stolen concept for a Stargate sequel, from what I've heard from Declan. So that also is not comforting to hear. But from the moment Apocalypto starts to the moment it ends, you feel you're transported to the ancient Mayan civilization. You see full body tattoos, body art, piercing, and jewelry. It's an exciting motion picture to look at. And it has the aesthetics that begin to appeal, and it fills you with wonder. Like, yeah, this movie, like, yeah, I mentioned this film is bloody gory. Very, very violent. Like, this is one of the goriest action films I have ever seen. And it's definitely not for the easily squeamish, because this film gets brutal. Like, holy shit. Like, parts are pulled out. There's brutal sacrifices. Like, villagers are even raped. Like, holy shit. Like, fuck. This big stuff like Cannibal Holocaust a fucking joke. Like, no shit. It's like, and here's, like, it's a great cynic moment from the film if it sounds like but to stay away, because the gore does not light up. This gore gets worse and worse as the film progresses. Like in a scene, like, yeah, you have, like, captives getting covered in blue paint, and they're being brought to this temple, and executioners, thanks to the lords, he's ripping the hearts out, decapitating the people afterwards. The heads then roll down the staircase and fall by their bodies. Then their head gets put on hot rocks, and thousands of people cheer. Like, there's thousands of heads on stakes all around. Apocalypto is unlike anything any viewer has likely seen in action. It's like Mel Gibson filmed it in a dead ton, but the fact that it explores this civilization that we never saw get portrayed in film at all before this movie released. It stores the life of how Mayans lived their lives, and we get thrown into what's basically the beginning of the end of their civilization, because this is set during the end of the Mayan civilization, before the Spanish came in and killed them all. Before the Spanish Revolution, the Spanish Revolution happened. It's set around that week. Like, Mel Gibson is a master at defining characters. Like it's good guys, you have no trouble cheering for them. They're sympathetic, they're believable, they're human. His bad guys are brave, they're good warriors, they're loyal to the cause, believable in the roles. They seek even more slaves and victims for sacrifice to their pagan gods. They're easy to dislike, and still respectable as humans. Like, the use of subtitles is excellent, because this movie is not in English. This movie is entirely in Mayan language, so there's no English in this movie, just a little heads up. And by having the characters spend their native tongue, like, it helps maintain the feel of the movie. And it gets so used to the subtitles, they don't really interfere. Like, how the movie starts is, we're in the early 16th century, and it's around the jungle, because the Mayans lived in the jungle. This tapir is running around frantically through the forest, then sprints a tripwire trap, and it gets impaled on a swinging branch full of spikes. And then we meet our protagonist, who's named Jaguar Paw. And he puts a tapir out of its misery and eagerly divides its internal organs between his hunters that are Corleone, Smoked Frog, and Cocoa Leaf, and blends it. And then he receives the tapir's testicles at the brunt of a joke, because he and his wife, they're still trying to have children. Then Jaguar Paw's father, who's named Flint Sky, offers some, like, remedial help and gives Blunted some red leaves that he instructs him to use the next time he and his wife do try to have kids. But then they get interrupted during this whole time by this band of refugees pass through the forest, and they look downtrodden. That apparently we see a fisherman, and he addresses Jaguar Paw and explains that their village got attacked and they're, like, seeking a new beginning. Like, they exchange food before the group moves on, and though Jaguar Paw's keen to know more about what happened, though, but his father says, like, no to that, and they have to go back to their village. But before they get back, Flint Sky explains to Jaguar Paw that the refugees, like, they got infected with fear. It definitely would not be brought into the village to fester, or should not be, for their own safety. So Jaguar goes back to his hut, and we see that he now has a kid, a small son, who's named Turtles Run. And and his wife is also now pregnant, and he greets her, who's named Seven. And Blunted also goes back to his wife, who's named Skyflower. His mother impatiently told him to hurry up and give her grandchildren, And then after they go into their hut, and Blunted runs out. Apparently, then they try to have, Blunted and his wife probably try to have sex, but then we do get a bit of a comedy moment right here, like, where he runs out screaming, he's holding his privates, and then it's like running around bare-ass nude and sets himself in a water trough right there because apparently he burned his dick. Yeah, like, because apparently we find out, as Flint Sky, we even see Flint Sky, like, laughing, because apparently, and we find out that, because apparently Flint Sky gave Blunted these leaves, and they were meant to cause this burning sensation to his dick when he rubs them, and Blunted gets mad at him, but then he just calms down, calms down and he starts laughing with everybody else, so you get a good moment between all the villagers, like, where, yeah, he does get a little mad at the prank that got pulled on him at first, but he's got chill about it. So they're still friends. They don't hate each other, so they're still pretty chill about it. He lets it go eventually. Yeah. Yeah, so that. But however, that's when our story kind of takes a dark turn and when all the dark stuff happens. Because it's that night, and and we cut to an old storyteller that's telling how men received gifts from the forest, but the forest had nothing left to give to them next. Then the villagers play music, they dance to Jaguar Paw's mind, he can't really think about the music. He's a little distracted about something at first, but Seven brings it back. And then, of course, but it turns out he was probably wondering what his father had told him, because the next morning after the little celebration, Mind Raiders, who's led by our antagonist Zero Wolf, they attack the village, and many get killed, including Flint Sky, who gets killed by another raider who's named Middle Eye. Jaguar Paw decides to hide his pregnant wife's and their youngest son and his son in a well before he gets captured as well during the attack. Then the raiders round up the villagers, and they get forced on a long march through the jungle. But then, of course, meanwhile, Jaguar Paw's wife and son, they're trapped in the well, and they're struggling to escape it. And the worst part is it's clearly about to rain, so once it rains, that well is going to fill up. So they're trying to get out fast, throughout the movie. Throughout the movie, his wife and son are in a well. And so, they're just trying to survive while she tries to give birth to Jaguar Paw's other kid. Yeah, the story isn't so much about the man's struggle to save his family, as it's about, a father's obligation to their children. The main character, Jaguar Paw, gets captured by the more advanced temple-building Mayans, and he's desperate to escape so he can save his wife and child from drowning in that well, because he hid them there so they wouldn't get captured. His own father was slain by the captors while trying to protect him. Then get the leader of the raiding party, whose son is along the trip as some kind of rite of passage, and he's proud of his son's rise to manhood. But so the story focuses on these father-son relationships as the main theme of the movie. It's kind of the driving force of the film. The movie's beautifully shot, and a descendant of the more civilized Mayan culture gets well captured in its cinematography. You start the movie with forest-dwelling folk, and the more familiar culture of the sacrifice-oriented Mayans is as shocking and incomprehensible to the viewer as with the unfortunate captives witnessing it all. You don't necessarily, it's not really a movie about the Mayans. It's more of a movie with Mayans in it. There's kind of a big difference. Movies about the Mayans concentrate on the culture and have more educational value and their way of storytelling. The movie just more tries to impress and be entertaining and shed some light on the Mayan culture. It's not too obvious or forced way. It even feels accurate and detailed. It doesn't even try to impress too much with it at all. The movie's really about its characters more than their culture. Right there. And yeah, so I think that's why I kind of think the film's incredibly good and authentic looking. The costumes and everything. Everything feels real. And it's got fine cinematography. The beautiful nature, of course, adds to the cinematography. And the sound design's incredible. The sound is intense at moments. It helps keep your adrenaline going. And this film, you can see why the film was nominated for Best Achievement in Sound Editing and Best Achievement in Sound Mixing. And also Best Achievement in Makeup. Right there. All those reasons. So after Jaguar Paw and the other captives are pretty much have been captured and they're being led there. like during that whole like march they're being forced on, they encounter raised forests, vast fields of failed maize crops, and villagers like decimated by an unknown disease apparently. They encounter one little girl who prophesizes the end of the Mayan world. So then they go into a city where the workers are toiling in limestone quarries. They're covered white by the excess and spreading quick lime over the buildings. Workers coughing up blood. Old man approaches our captives. He's drooling and he's begging for help, but he gets kicked away by a hurricane and he's told to die with dignity. And he sees some women captives who are separated from the men and they get sold as slaves. So Blunted has to watch his mother-in-law get auctioned, but she gets rejected due to her age, so she's free to wander and she follows Blunted as far as she can go. She touches his arm before closing her eyes against a pillar and helpless, so she at least just try to be with her like son-in-law before he's being sold off to die there. So you get a little heartwarming moments with her, even though like that's not that's actual mother, it's his mother-in-law, so he at least like tries to make sure Blunted goes out calm and fine before she's not allowed to fall further. So I like there's some good character moments right there. So the men get led then the men get led through this tunnel, and they have to see pictures of the walls depicting all the human sacrifices right there. And they know what's now you can see they now fear and know what's about to happen to all of them. Their bodies are painted blue, they get led to the top of a step pyramid. And you see a bunch of victims' heads like get tossed down the steps and collected in baskets. And Jaguar has to actually watch the first captive be sacrificed, his heart getting ripped out, his head getting cut off. The same fate then also befalls Curlnose, and then Jaguar Paw is the next one to be brought to the pedestal. And he's about to accept his fate, and he waits. But then, however, just as he's about to be sacrificed, the high priest stops the sacrifice because a solar eclipse is happening. And the priest then announces to the crowd that apparently the gods they're sacrificing the prisoners to is all pleased, and he begs for his son to come back. But then the priests and the Mayan leaders are well aware that the eclipse will pass, so they use these celestial events to wield power over the public and their enemies, and then instructs Zero Wolf to just get rid of the other captives. And this is where the movie gets really intense and gory in parts. Like, there's no holding back on the action sequences. This movie gets filled with more action than you'd perhaps expect with a movie like this. With first being like the movie you're probably expecting something like a culture drama. But it's definitely not. The movie is about to get, once this part happens, this is where the movie is going to get more intense and action-filled than you would expect, and it doesn't lose any of its meaning or power. The movie's filled with some really effectively powerful sequences, right? Or like it could have been definitely, like, they could have just went and gloried in the gore like Passion of the Christ did, which is the only reason that Passion of the Christ is even famous for is just because it's gore. That's the only reason it even got popularity. They could have did that with this movie. Like, no. They treat the bloodshed as exactly as what it was in that time. It's just a routine part of the Mayan culture. So it never looks out of place or gratuitous. And this movie actually tries to further a story. And then instead of actually dominate it. Like, Gibson taps again into an obsession with the bestest of human vices, a most primordial act of the unforgiving natural world. And he dwells on it here in the way that can almost be described as beautiful. Especially like with the human sacrifice scenes, like the deheartings and the beheadings. It's a fantastic jaguar attack there's also a jaguar attack on the face. There's skull cracking, skin ripping battles to death, hornet attacks, and also Jaguar's Paw's wife having to give birth underwater. Like, the violence arises from the fact that these marauders are bloody thirsty Mayan warriors are harvesting neighboring tribes for human sacrifices. Even then, like, much of the violence is Shakespearean and takes place just off camera. Like, you see women being carried off to the rape and pillage scene, and you hear their cries, and you don't see them being raped and murdered. So, thankfully, we don't see that stuff. Like, Apocalypto, it's like a simple contraption. It's got surrounding details that, as thick as they might be, they portray the simple stuff of the story. And Apocalypto's a little more than a rousing chase film. It's like, there's good 90 minutes of it finding Jaguar Paw sprinting barefoot through the forest, trying to escape his captors, who are trying to close it behind him and get him back. So yeah, after the solar eclipse stops the sacrifice, Jaguar Paw and the others get taken to the ball court. They get instructed to run through the length and Paris towards the forest, at the end with a cynical promise of freedom. not actual promise, just lying to get them to run, should they make it. So Cut Rock runs ahead at the end of the court as a finisher, but of course, like, we all know, like, the captives are going to be used as target practice, so, yeah, so he obviously dies. Then Blunted and Smoke Rock are also the first to run. Blunted gets speared in the lower back, and Smoke Rock is hit with a large stone, and is then finished off by Cut Rock. Then Jaguar Paw and the fisherman are told to flee. Jaguar's Paw necklace gets ripped off by Middle Eye and gets thrown to the dirt before he runs. And they evade more projectiles, but the fisherman is shot through the head by Snake Link's arrow, and Jaguar Paw gets impaled for his side, falling near Blunted. But before Cut Rock can finish him, Blunted lunges and grabs Cut Rock by the leg, and buys Jaguar Paw some time to be able to escape. So Cut Rock kills Blunted with a simple blow to the head, but Jaguar Paw breaks off the arrowhead in his own body, and he stabs Cut Rock in the neck, and then Cut Rock stumbles as Jaguar Paw stands, removes the arrow shaft from his side, and then he runs right into the forest right there. Then Zero Wolf runs to his son, and literally coaxes him to sleep. So his son then dies of his arm. Zero Wolf pretty much gets his dagger, then he puts on the necklace, and running after going to kill Jaguar Paw, get revenge on him. And then more Whole Kings even follow him as well. Jaguar Paw, as he's running, he then runs through a corn crop, but he falls to a mass open grave with the remains of thousands of other victims they sacrificed, many obviously years earlier. Then he runs across the decaying bodies of the jungle where he climbs a tree and he hides, but he's still wounded, so blood's still dripping down, and the Whole Kings run past him, and once they're gone, then we get the Jaguar Cub scene. When he turns, he sees this Jaguar Cub growling at him, and it looks very real. It's not some CGI Jaguar. I like that the Jaguar actually looks like a real Jaguar right there. Yeah, it actually looks like how a Jaguar would probably growl at you. He then hears this louder roar behind him, and he literally turns to see also the threatening Mother Jaguar right there. Then the Whole Kings stop. Then they realize they lost Jaguar Paw's trail. And then one of them sees blood on Middle Eye's shoulder. And they backtrack. They keep their eyes in the forest. And that's how they find Jaguar Paw running through the forest. And so Speaking Wind pursues him. One of the hunters. Then they're past merging and clearing, and Speaking Wind gets attacked by the Jaguar that was chasing Jaguar Paw as well. He then gets mauled to death by the Jaguar. Then the others arrive and they kill the Jaguar. And while Jaguar Paw is fleeing, he ends up in a sinkhole, but he does manage to get out. Then he pauses and he decides he's not going to keep running. He knows he will never make it. He'll never make it. The hunters will kill him regardless. He's going to stop being afraid. He's going to stop running. So the Whole Kings approach, and Jaguar Paw's all covered in mud. So he pretty much confronts them, decides to get rid of the hunters, dispose of them before he goes back. Because he knows, if he keeps running, they're going to find him eventually, and running's not going to do any good. So he instigates, what does he do? He tosses this wasp's hive at them, and the wasps, of course, predictably attack. If a wasp's hive gets broken, of course they attack the person who broke it. And then Jaguar Paw keeps running while the wasps are attacking the hunters. And he runs to a stream, and he finds a poison arrow frog, collects its venom on a few large thorns. Then he runs in a circle, and he hides in the reeds. He waits for the hunters. The thunder starts to roll overhead. Then we cut back to Seven, cuts back to his wife and son, who are attempting to escape the well. They toss the Stalsil to the surface with a rope attached to it, and his wife manages to climb halfway, but sadly the rock breaks, and she falls back. She barely does get hurt, though, so because her water breaks. However, sadly, that also causes her water to break, so they're still trapped in there, and at the worst possible time as well, because the fall caused her water to break. But what makes Apocalypto work well? Because you right there, you got all the atmosphere in the Untamed Jungle. And this Untamed Jungle right there, it works well with one another like pieces in a puzzle. And you get the gritty feel of the characters, especially with their teeth. If they had pearly white and perfectly aligned teeth, it would immediately fail. And the act, and yeah, and honestly, Rudy Youngblood gives a phenomenal performance. Yeah, like so, and get this, like most of the parts of the movie were done by even people who never acted in their lives. That's what makes up some of the performances really phenomenal, because these were newcomers that never acted in life, and they got the portrayals of the Mayans very well done. The story is good, like it really falls through. Even though, like, yeah, it could have been a good amount shorter, but and so much time was like wasted running and just scenes being dragged out. But the point was kind of established long before many of the scenes led up. But other than that, like the story is well done, and the resulting the film completely did break cinematic ground, especially with all the risks Gibson took when he was making this film. Like another film released around 2006 and 1993 by Paul Greengrass, that cast in that movie helped transport the viewer to. The cast helps even transport the viewer to the mind world. That's Apocalypto, and the acting, not all the acting is perfect, but still. Like, and you guys, like, it does start out like comedic at first, but the pacing does accelerate quickly, that the movie feels half hour shorter than it actually is. And like the last act is literally extended chasing a King Jaguar Paw trying to escape his sacrifice at the hands of the brutal Mayan kingdom. Like, in addition to being a gripping adventure, the story is also a good depiction of illustration of the social upheaval and period of the history of the Mayan culture. It's not to say that it was depicted with 100% historical accuracy, though, but yeah, like even like Mel Gibson can do better. Can still direct better history stuff than Ridley Scott. Like, sure, like maybe it's some historical inaccuracies with this film, but even if this was released months after Mel Gibson's most infamous controversy, did you see him attacking historians like Ridley Scott did when he made Napoleon? He didn't, but you sure didn't see Mel Gibson attacking historians whenever he was directing stuff like Braveheart or this movie or Hacksaw Ridge, or even Passion of the Christ. Definitely not. Yeah, like, it's definitely also not like 10,000 BC either, where literally it gets all the caveman portrayals wrong, and instead of actually good action, most of the film is just some boring-ass PG-13 shit here that pretty much gets most of the cavemen wrong, and even having mammoths live in the desert and not the Ice Age during the opening scene. Like, yeah, this was the movie 10,000 BC tried to be. Like, 10,000 BC is the same plot. So, instead of, like, though, with human sacrifice, though, a guy pretty much has to, yeah, like, it's both same plots, though. A guy has to basically save his love interest. Like, 10,000 BC does that same plot, except the actors are so shitty in 10,000 BC, and they're not even played with, and they're played by Americanized actors. Right there. It's like, oh my God, like, Apocalypto actually gets it right here. That's why I call Apocalypto the good 10,000 BC, because they're kind of similar in plot, except one's done horribly, one's actually done with effort. And the one done with effort is this movie. But then, of course, after Jaguar Paw's getting his revenge on the captors and is defeating them, and after Jaguar Paw's wife's water broke, we get to the finale, which is definitely the most epic part of the film. Because once the whole cane's past where Jaguar Paw's hiding, Jaguar Paw gets a large leaf, and he decides to turn into a blowgun. He fires his darts at the hanging moss, because they're already now weakened by all the wasp stings they got. As hanging moss falls to the ground, his cries do attract Middle Eye. Middle Eye runs back. Then he comes face to face with Jaguar Paw, and then they run each other like crying with bludgeon. That hanging moss drops, and Middle Eye swings his own, and they approach each other, and Jaguar Paw barely manages to duck. He does suffer a mild blow to the head. And as he slides under Middle Eye's attack, like, Jaguar Paw picks up Hanging Moss's bludgeon and rises to strike Middle Eye in the temple. And Middle Eye, like, calls him almost... There's one last time Middle Eye does call him, and Jaguar Paw kills him with a blow under the chin. Then it suddenly starts raining. And so Jaguar Paw remembers his wife and son, and he goes back to the cistern, because he has to save his wife and son before that well falls with water and they drown. Zerwolf and the other hunters, like Monkey Jaw and Ten Peccary, the only ones left, they see Middle Eye's body and Jaguar Paw escaping. And Zerwolf is furious by this, and so he outruns the other two in his pursuit. Like, Jaguar Paw just manages to get to the cistern to find it filling with water, and his wife is in labor. She's begging him to hurry and be quick. And an arrow nearly misses just as he's about to save them, though, an arrow nearly misses him, and he has to go back into the jungle because Zero Wolf is closing in. And so Monkey Jaw and Ten Peccary, they pause by the well. They see him at the bottom, but they resume the chase. They clearly decide that they're not worth killing over, so they don't bother. They just want to pursue Jaguar Paw. Jaguar Paw goes to a spot in the forest that he sees, and then he faces Zero Wolf, who shoots an arrow into his shoulder. Jaguar Paw's even more wounded now, but Jaguar Paw stands, he waits, he watches as Zero Wolf charges at him with his dagger drawn, and Zero Wolf fails to notice this trip wire and sets off the trap, and he gets impaled by sharp spikes. So, by the time Monkey Jaw and Ten Peccary arrive, Zero Wolf is dead. They chase Jaguar Paw to the beach, where Jaguar Paw collapses from exhaustion. They catch up to him, but they stop, and right here, this is where you all know the Spanish Revolution. This is where that enters the picture briefly. They stare at the sea, and this is the very day the Spanish Revolution was starting. There's fleet of Spanish ships has arrived, and soldiers are rowing to shore in small boats. Monkey Jaw and Ten Peccary are memorized by it, and so they go to the shoreline to greet the soldiers. And Jaguar Paw, though, goes back to the well to save his wife and son. And he finds that he finds his wife just gave birth while underwater, and so he pulls his family out of the cistern. Then the rain stops, and Jaguar Paw is carrying his newborn son, followed by his wife and his other son, and they're looking back towards the Spanish ships that arrived, and his wife wonders if they should go see them, but Jaguar Paw says they should keep going and just live a new beginning. And that's where the movie ends. And from there off screen, you know how it's going to fully end for the Mayan civilization. The Spanish army slaughtered all the Mayans, as we all know how it went through history. Jaguar Paw and his family managed to escape from the Maya civilization. They start their life far away from the outcome, and after everything they've gone through, they can now live the rest of their days in private. Right there. So at least it ends decent for Jaguar Paw and his family. They at least managed to get away alive. Now, would I have any bad qualities with the film? Definitely, I've mentioned the pacing is a little slow. That's one thing I can agree on. Some people may not like the idea that there's no English in the film, but I don't even mind it, guys, because this is not supposed to be an English film. This is supposed to be about the Mayans, and the Mayans never spoke English. And I've seen loads of foreign films that have no English in them and are purely subtitles, so I could care less about subtitles. Another problem is that, because like I've mentioned, one of the reasons this movie barely got any attention because let's talk about the infamous controversy that happened around the time of this film. One of Mel's most infamous ones. During July 2006, Gibson got arrested where he drove under influence and sped in his vehicle with an open container of alcohol, and apparently Gibson had told the arresting officer some other stuff, and then exploded in an angry tirade with the officer when he would not allow him to drive home. And then later, what got told was Gibson apparently said to and though after the arrest report got leaked, though Gibson issued apologies. But yeah, we all know that. I don't need to go into more details. That was one of the reasons why this movie just got overlooked, because it was released during one of Mel's most controversial times. That was the problem. Again, that was why this should have been. Gibson should have just did this in 2004, not Passion of the Christ. I wish Gibson made this in 2004, not 2006. Then maybe it wouldn't be overlooked. Other than those, I think Apocalypto is quite a good film that depicts the downfall of the Mayans. And it's worth buying for those who are interested in seeing a film like that. So in the end, Apocalypto I think is worth buying for your collection, no doubt, if you want to see one of Mel Gibson's better directed films during the 2000s, and before he went on hiatus for 10 years. Anyways, guys, that's it for my review of Apocalypto, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Apocalypto, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you are a Mel Gibson fan but want to see one of the better films he directed that came after Braveheart, then totally buy Apocalypto for your collection, no doubt. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Apocalypto, I'm going to give Apocalypto an 8 out of 10. There we go, guys. That wraps up my review for Apocalypto. So, yeah, and so recently I ended up seeing Ghostbusters Frozen Empire for people's own benefits, and I'm going to review that next week. And also make it a Ghostbusters franchise ranking because I haven't done one yet. Yeah, where I rank all the films to include Frozen Empire. So yeah, and then I'll get around to finally reviewing... oh, actually, no. Terminator 2 I was going to review, but I remember just another film coming out this week that I'm not going to see this weekend, maybe next week. And that's Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. And I realized I had not reviewed Godzilla or Godzilla King of Monsters or Kong Skull Island yet. So I'm going to review those next. Skull Island I might have to watch somewhere else. I don't own that movie. But I do own the 2 Warner Bros. Godzilla films, so it'll be easy watching those. Until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.